As all the 2020 Democratic candidates descended on Iowa for the annual state fair, President Trump's Republican challenger also stopped by, but the GOP voters of Iowa seem ready to stick with President Trump.
As we all know, Iowa is one of the several key states that will play an integral role in the 2020 election.
I've heard that.
Here to discuss how the GOP plans to keep Iowa red is chairman of the Iowa Republican Party, Jeff Kaufman. He joins us now via Skype. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us.
Crystal and Sauger, it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you, sir. While we do, though, we need to get this out from the top. We have recent comments from Congressman Steve King saying, what if we went back through all the family trees and pulled those people out that were products of rapes of incest? Would there be any population of the world left? He's had widespread condemnation here in Washington. What is the response in the home state and your response in particular, sir?
Well, we put out a statement. I believe it was last night. Look, the Republican Party is the party of life. We're very proud of that fact. But in regards to the statements that of population and where that population comes from, those comments are outrageous, and that they are not reflective of the Republican Party of Iowa. And that the people of the 4th District are going to have to make a decision on what they think of those comments, the context of those comments, etc. But I would characterize the assertion of where our population comes from as outrageous.
Yeah.
Liz Cheney, number 3 Republican in the House, as you know, said that it was time for him to go in reference to Steve King. Do you agree with that?
That is not my call, Crystal. I, as the chair of the party, I let these primaries play out. There's going to be a very vigorous primary in the 4th District and in the 2nd District. My job is to not put my foot on the scales in those districts, but rather let the people tell me who their nominee is, and then at the general election, that's when the state party gets involved.
Well, and one last question on that. One last question on that. If he is the nominee, which is very likely, I know he's got primary challengers, but very likely that he makes it through and is once again the nominee, is the Republican Party going to back him?
It's going to be a very vigorous primary. There's no doubt about that. I have to receive the opinions of the 4th District. And so there are candidates and that are very widely. The 4th District has all the information. They have years and years of information that they can use to make that decision. We exist, the Republican Party exists as a receiver of what the people's will is. And in terms of the primary, those Republicans are going to get that shot. That is not my call. They are going to give us a slate of candidates. Most of what we do is actually going to be statewide initiatives anyway, get out the vote, absentee, et cetera.
Sure, and we want to get to some issues and talk to you about that too, but last piece on this, so no matter what, I mean, this is not Steve King's first inflammatory, outrageous comment. No matter what he says, if he gets the nomination, the Republican Party is going to back him.
The people of the 4th District are going to have their say, and they're going to hand their decision to me.
Okay. You're in a tough spot, and I think that that's probably the best way to handle it here. But Jeff, we also, of course, we need to talk to you about what's going on right now in Iowa. There's a huge debate right now in Washington. Everybody's trying to read the tea leaves. As somebody there on the ground, are the tariffs making a substantive difference in farmer support for President Trump?
At this point, I don't think they are. Rural Iowa, the farming community, and I should tell you for full disclosure, I'm a 7th generation on the farm. My son is 8th generation. So I know the farmers. I know the ag industry. I've got a feel for the pulse out there in rural Iowa. And right now, they're sticking with the president. Right now, I believe the farmers, and this is where I think sometimes people that are surprised that they're still with the president may be making a misjudgment or a miscalculation. These farmers understand macroeconomics. These farmers understand that there may have to be short-term pain for a complete reworking of the relationship between China and the United States in terms of their trade. At this point, they are sticking with the president. There have been, this state has been covered with reporters, both state and national, going to farmers and asking them, what do you think? Now, if you've got a farmer that with a partisan axe to grind or a Johnson County organic turnip farmer, no, they're gonna be against the president, but I don't believe that it has a whole lot to do with the tariffs. But if you ask your typical farmer, and many have had that question, they seem to be sticking with this president. There has to be progress. And I think the president is still making his case adequately for those farmers.
Well, and I mean, we've seen farm incomes decline massively even before you take into account the impact of the trade war. I mean, how much more can farmers take? You've seen spike in bankruptcy. You've seen a spike in farmer suicides. That's how tough things are out there right now. How much more can people take?
Sure, and remember, I am who you are talking about, and so I understand. I understand that group, and you're right. There were tough times before. The farming is a cyclical nature. We've raised hogs and sheep and cattle and soybeans and alfalfa and corn, and they run in a cycle. Now, I'm not going to tell you that these tariffs are not negatively affecting. I can tell you this: on the way in today, I talked to a young man. He's a state legislator, but he's also a farmer, and I was asking him about the relief, what he's calling the tariff relief, the bill to help some of these farmers, and he told me it's making all the difference in the world. It's not a solution, but that short-term gain. But I can tell you this, both of you, the short-term pain that they are receiving from the tariffs, I will tell you right now, the Green New Deal will blow up the agricultural economy and rural Iowa as we know it.
Well, let's talk about that actually. Let's talk about that actually, because another thing that has hurt farmers throughout the Midwest, including in Iowa, is these massive floods that have been linked to climate change. So I hear you. You don't like the Green New Deal. You don't think that's the path forward. What is your path forward on climate change, and how has it impacted farmers there? Well,
first of all, the connection between these weather events and between farming. Yes, I'm not going to tell you that we don't have global warming. What I am going to tell you is that every single solitary weather event, I think they need to be scientifically linked, number one. Number two, the Green New Deal is not just about climate change. Even Ocasio-Cortez's own chief of staff said this is a sea change, a fundamental change in how government does business. Yep. These farmers are good stewards of the land. The farmers I know are environmentally conscious, and if there is scientific connections between weather events that are happening right now across the board, I think most farmers realize we have to move ahead on climate change. Although when you have India and China completely being ignored in the dialogue by our national politicians, it's a little bit of a political game rather than trying to find a solution.
Jeff, I think you hit the nail on that. I think
this Green New Deal is about more than just climate change. This is about decimating our beef industry, and this is an overreach of epic proportions by anybody's standard.
So, Jeff, one of the things that everybody's trying to look at right now is who is the most electable, who can appeal to the Midwestern states which delivered President Trump to the White House. We just had the Iowa State Fair. All the Democrats were giving their message. I mean, who do you think is the most beatable from President Trump's perspective as the chairman of the, not necessarily who could, but who would you like to see as a Democratic nominee?
Sure, and I mean, obviously, I guess my perfect answer would be he'll beat them all, and he'll beat them all easily. We know there are differences out here in Iowa in terms of his competition. Elizabeth Warren, I get down on my knees and pray every evening, please let her be the nominee, because I know that puts Iowa in the red category. I think anybody that has openly accepted Ocasio-Cortez's leadership, has endorsed the Green New Deal, that raised their hand and then continues to talk about providing free health insurance for illegal or undocumented residents. I think those folks are going to be easy to beat. That's precisely the reason why you don't hear anybody talking about giving away those benefits or that Green New Deal at the state fair. Right. I mean, you could hear crickets when that question is asked because they understand that is a huge, huge problem. But the further left this party goes, the easier that Donald Trump is going to have it in winning, even among people that may not necessarily like his style. I think his policies are going to look very mainstream compared to the Ocasio-Cortez barrage of irresponsible fiscal policies.
I mean, what's interesting, though, is that, of course, we all have our justified skepticism of polling and how accurate that can be. But as of today, you've got Biden and Bernie, who are at opposite ends of the Democratic ideological spectrum, as looking like the most electable against President Trump. So how do you explain Bernie's appeal when he does embrace a lot of those ideas that you're talking about?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think the premise of your question answered part of that. I don't know how good polls are in primaries, but I would say what you're seeing is that those polls are a microcosm of what's going on in the Democratic Party. I'm seeing it out in the rural areas. I've got Truman Democrats and Kennedy Democrats that are taking another look at Donald Trump. Even if they don't necessarily like his style, they're taking a look at Donald Trump because of Bernie Sanders. On the other hand, we've got our college and university counties that are, it's all or nothing. I mean, we don't care. We want a socialist. I think you're seeing that internal battle played out in those polls from the perspective of a seventh generation Iowan. God help us if Bernie Sanders and the AOC disciples get in. From the perspective of the chairman of the Republican Party, Lord, I'll pay for their hotels if they just please come out here and speak.
Jeff, one other thing I wanted to ask you about before we let you go is, we had some pretty dire indicators yesterday. Dow dropped 800 points. You've got this inverted yield curve people are talking about, which has always preceded a recession over the past 50 years. If there is a downturn in the economy, how do you think that affects President Trump's reelection chances?
Well, we've got the greatest economy in years, the best unemployment records in a variety of different categories that we've had in years, but we still have people, and we have 20 of them basing their whole campaigns on winning because supposedly the economy isn't very good. So, I would normally have told you in the past, Crystal, that there is a direct correlation. I don't know, we seem to have left those years, but obviously a good economy, a healthy economy is going to carry this president across the line. We've got cyclical. It's kind of what I was telling you about the ag economy. There are also cycles in our regular economy. We've also got experts saying that there's no indication that there's going to be a slowdown or recession. And I said this when President Obama was the president as well, and some good things were happening. I would hope that all Democrats and Republicans would hope and pray for a great economy and a safe world. Right now, I see 20 people out there that are so hungry to stop tweeting and to pass through AOC's craziness, it's almost like they're wishing bad things would happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fair.
Not
but
necessarily. But
I agree with you that everyone should be cheering for a healthy economy and a safe
Nobody
world.
should wish for a recession right now.
Absolutely
Jeff,
not.
thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.